Okay, today we're talking about how to know which foods are Kitnios, and in particular, we're going to spend more of our time on some of the questionable items, and even more particularly on cottonseed oil, okay, which has been more of a tumult as to whether it is or is not Kitnios. Okay, so we'll start from the simple parts. Okay, we know there's a whole slew of foods that we consider that we don't eat on Pesach because they're Kitnios. There's a midgan Ashkenazim, rice and beans and lentils and peas and a whole group of foods like that. And there's a bunch of foods, of course, that are not Kitnios. People ask about them, but garlic and coffee and I don't know, a whole bunch of radishes, all kinds of other foods that people ask about, those are not Kitnios. Okay, now before we get into the real issue, the Ramah says something very interesting. The Ramah says, there's one halacha about Kitnios, basically, in Tafin Gimel, beginning of Tafin Gimel, and the Ramah says that anise and coriander are not Kitnios. Okay, it's the anise, the aliander, which means coriander, they're not Kitnios. So if you look in the Darkei Moshe, when he explains, he says, they're not Kitnios. He says, an ayin, this is like a classic medrash kliya, not supposed to be, ayin siman reish dalet. Okay, siman reish dalet is the middle of Hilchos Brachos. Okay, so the Imam's like, what was he talking about? Like, you wonder if he even meant Or Chaim. Like, what was he talking about when he said sim? And what he means to say is like this. You look in Siman Reish Dalet, it says it's in Hilchos Brachos, and it says there that if things that grow on the ground, you make bar priyadam on them. But if you eat a spice that grows on the ground, you don't make a bar priyadam on it, because the spices are not meant to be eaten by themselves. They're not meant to. You're not supposed to eat these spices as is. You're not supposed to eat the food. They're always there with something else, and therefore, if you eat them, you make shahakul. And what the Ramah is saying is that the minute that we have tonight in Kitnios means you're not allowed to eat those kinds of foods that you usually eat by themselves. But any food it's always secondary, it's always a spice or something else, those things are not Kitnios, and that's the reason why anise and coriander are not Kitnios. You don't eat them by themselves, you always eat them as part of another food, and therefore, even though you're going to hear in a few minutes that anise and coriander theoretically would qualify as Kitnios, they meet the requirements of what should make something usher as Kitnios, they're not, because just like in Hilchos Brachos, those things are not bar priyadam. They're not considered. Of course, they grow from the ground. They meet the requirements of what would make something a bar priyadam, so to speak. But since they're always tuffle, they're always part of another food. They're not considered to be a food of the ground. Therefore, for Kitnios, also the same thing. The minhag doesn't include those kinds of foods that are only always used as spices and things like that.
Right. Could you start from the beginning? Like, what is the first mucker of Kitnios?
I'm not starting from there. I'm sorry. No, it wasn't. But it is. Okay. I'll give you a 10-second. The Gemara says you're allowed to eat Kitnios. And there was, the Gemara mentioned, no, it doesn't say you're allowed to eat Kitnios. It mentions all kinds of foods that we consider to be Kitnios. It says you're allowed to eat them. And when 600 years ago, when the people starting a minhag that you shouldn't eat these foods, most Rishonim were very upset about it, and were very angry. Like, what are you bothering people and making them not have more foods that they can't eat? Some people even said, well, if you tell them they can't eat that, they can eat more foods that are shilos of chametz them also, that could become chametz. But in the end, the Ashkenazim took on that minhag that we don't eat all this whole group of foods. Okay, so there's a whole, those foods, so we know that certain foods aren't Kitnios, like rice and beans and peas, and we know that certain foods are not Kitnios, and we know, I just told you now that that things that are spices as a rule, I think that's a spice, we'll hear an exception soon, but as a rule, things that are spices are not going to be Kitnios. But there's a whole to-do about a bunch of newer foods that people want to eat. Our most famous one is Quinoa, okay, and also guar gum, and cottonseed oil, guar gum, a whole some other foods like that. A little bit we'll talk about peanuts and string beans. Okay, but a bunch of these other foods that some people do consider them Kitnios and some people don't, and we're going to try to explain more. Okay, one more plot in our introduction is Rosh Schwartz said that the only things that are considered Kitnios, when you have a food that's Kitnios, let's say dill, okay, that we consider Kitnios for whatever reason we consider it. It says the Isser only applies to the seed or the bean. That's the part of the food that is usher as the Kitnios, and not the leafy part or the stalk or things like that. Okay, only the seed or the bean.
You were talking yesterday about cilantro and coriander.
Yes.
That's what people were asking me yesterday.
Okay. Yes, that's not today's discussion. Even though that is a to-do, but yes. Okay. So
why was the leaf on the toilet?
So the that has not gemina. We'll talk more about this later. Again, is for marijuana. Okay, if anybody cares for marijuana, because the marijuana that people use, there's three parts that are used. There's marijuana, and there's hashish, and there's hashish oil. Okay, and the marijuana comes from the flower or the leaves, and the hashish comes from the gum, like the sap that comes out of the tree, and the oil comes from the hashish. Okay, so even as we're going to see soon, there's a shiloh whether it is or is not Kitnios, whether the plant that it comes from is or is not Kitnios. But since the Kitnios only applies to the seed or the bean part of it, and there are things made from the seed or the bean, we'll talk about those also, but since the marijuana itself comes from the leaves or the flowers, so if you live in the right state and you're allowed to use marijuana, you shouldn't worry about the Kitnios. Kitnios. Of course, medical marijuana you could take no matter what, because Cholim are allowed to take Kitnios. I know that says what, you can take medical marijuana? Yeah, but it's not Kitnios. So good news is that even if the plant that it comes from, which we'll see is a question whether it is or is not Kitnios, but the marijuana itself you're safe. Okay? Okay. So now, what's the simple and most obvious reason that most people know about why many of these foods that I just mentioned to you, quinoa and cottonseed oil and peanuts and all these kind of foods should not be Kitnios is because of the following reason. The Ramah, I told you, says that anise and coriander are not Kitnios, yet the Taz and the Magen Avraham say there's serious chashas that chametz might be mixed into it. Okay, and it's something that I've said this a few times already. That I went to a spice company to learn about this, and he said to me, he said, "Come, I'm going to show you." And he scooped out right out of the bag. Stam a random make. He scooped out some of the stuff, put it out in our hands, and you looked at it, and there were other grains mixed into it. Okay, I couldn't tell you whether those other grains were from the Chameshes Midgan. I don't know enough. He says, but to him, that's the standard thing that these things have other things mixed into it. So nothing changed from 500 years ago to now. That these grains either grow near them, or for whatever reason they have them mixed into it. So the Chakakov says, since the Taz and Magen Avraham talk about that, maybe you shouldn't eat them anyhow, even though they're not Kitnios, maybe you shouldn't eat them anyhow. So Chakakov says, so why didn't it get included into the minhag? So if they really have chametz mixed into it, which of course is the main reason one of the reasons why we avoid Kitnios, why didn't they include it in the Isser also? Why not? Taka has chametz into it, could have chametz in it. As we see from the fact that we won't eat it. So he says it's because there was so much opposition to the minhag in the first place. The whole minhag was really, most Rishonim thought was not a good idea. People were upset that people were having this minhag. As he says, it's whatever we asered, and that's it. And stop adding more things onto it. So Hagam, there's another food that has a real chash to it.
So where's that list?
The list of what?
The things that are aser. It didn't start from the Ramah.
It starts from Rishonim, from late Rishonim.
That's what I'm asking. Where is that list?
On our website.
Where's the Pesach guide?
On our website.
In 1200.
Okay, so I can try to give you a list afterwards if you want to, if that'll make you feel better.
I just want to know, where is the first makar? In other words,
where
is the first one that says, these are the items that are
I believe it's a Mordechai. I don't remember offhand. Okay, I don't remember offhand. I can look at it.
Sources loses.
No. He says who being such an idea that there are foods that you now eat that are Kitnios. I don't remember. I can look for you afterwards. Okay, so he says you shouldn't add on to it, and that idea that the Chakakov says that we don't add on to things that are from what we have that are in the minhag is brought by the Kleisenberg Rebbe and Rav Moshe to explain respectively why cottonseed oil and peanuts are not Kitnios. Okay, those are foods that were not eaten. Peanuts came to where Yidden lived much later in time. Cottonseed oil, I'll explain to you later why no one was using it before him, until maybe 100 years ago, a little more than that. And therefore, they say they were not included in the minhag. So even if in theory they should be part of the minhag, they weren't around at the beginning of the minhag. We had enough of adding things onto this, and whatever was usher is usher, and new things don't get usher. Okay, that's what they say. So, okay, very good. I'm getting to that. Okay, so now, before I get to corn, I'm going to pause you for a second before I get to corn. There is another food like this that I'm going to just explain to you why this does not apply to, and that is canola oil. Okay, canola oil did not come to the United States until the 1980s. Okay, so there are people who thought, well, if it just came, then it's included in this rule of things that are new and that are not usher. But The truth is not like that. The truth is that canola oil is really a specific variety of rapeseed oil. Rapeseed oil is an oil that's been used for hundreds of years, to the point that the Chubas in the Marsham, who speaks about whether the oil of Kitnios should be usher or not, which of course we know is usher because the Ramah says it is, but he talks about, the Marsham talks about that the oil he's talking about is rapeseid oil. Okay? He talks about Indian roughs, okay, which is the German word for rapeseed oil. He's talking about rapeseed oil, and then of course the rapeseed oil of course is Kitnios. Rapeseed of course is Kitnios. He's trying to whether the oil also is. So what happened was it wasn't legal in the United States because it had uricic acid, too much uricic acid. So until the Canadians figured out how to breed a plant with low uricic acid, and then they called that new variety, they called it canola oil.
Smart.
It was smart. The name goes over better in English, but also they were very proud of coming from Canada, so it's a contraction of the word canola oil, Canadian oil, so they were very proud of themselves.
So you had a low acid.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't tell you. Okay, so maybe that's the A is for that. Okay.
Oil.
That was not my hop on it, but okay, however you want it. Okay, whatever it is, they came out with a new name. So the canola is just is a special variety of an oil that was around for a long time. Okay, so we said is new oils, new things, new things that there are don't get included to the minute. That's what many people say. Rabbi Schwartz says that. Most of the American Pesach follower Moshe said. Close America also, if that makes you feel better. Also, and say that new things don't get included.
What happened to peanuts then?
Just give me a second. I'm almost there. Okay. So, however, other people don't like that at all. Other people don't like that at all. Most of the people who say this are following what Rabbi Yasha said. And Rabbi Yasha said, he says, I don't understand. He says, you're telling me we don't eat on new things onto the minute? He says, corn came from the New World. Corn came after the minute was started. He says, soy came from the Far East in the 1700s. Okay, so it came also after the minute was started. He says, and peanuts. Now look at peanuts. Peanuts, now there are still countries that eat peanuts. I'm told that in South Africa, peanut butter is a common food on Pesach, okay, because they don't eat it. And in America, until 30, 40 years ago, there were lots of people who ate peanuts also. There were lots of people who still eat peanuts. Rav Moshe says that peanuts are not usher. But he says, but guess what? But nowadays, no one in America, it's not common in America that people eat peanuts on Pesach. He says, so what happened? What about the corn and soy and peanuts? How come they're usher? You told me now I eat on things to the minute. Really? If we don't eat corn, we go get special Pepsi. We don't drink the one with corn syrup in it. What's wrong? Why do we eat that stuff? Because, he said, obviously, it's not true. That's what Chagakov held that there's such a thing we don't eat onto the minute. He says, but obviously that's not what's going on. We have to do it onto the minute. To those who don't like this reason, which is we don't eat onto the minute, they say, look around. All the foods you don't eat on Pesach are foods that are, a lot of those foods are new foods. Okay, and the others will answer back. The others will answer back that even though we say there's a rule you can't eat on, what mice is something that's a minute is a minute. Minute is what do people do? Okay, so if everybody decides that let's stop eating corn also, and they throw that into the minute, then they throw it in. A rule only has sense when you talk about like Ishad Rabbanan. So there's a rule when it includes this and doesn't include that. But when something is in a minute, there's a certain looseness, and things don't always follow, so to speak, follow the rules. So we can agree with the Chagakov that we don't want to eat new foods, but we don't have to. But once in a while, something will slip in, and okay, so people included it. A minute is a minute.
Where did corn? What year? 1952. So somebody got up and said corn is Kitnios, and America was not.
By the way, that's expression minig pashut. It doesn't mean a simple minig. It means a minig that's spread.
Okay. So Poskim mentioned pashut.
So those of you not Quinoa, I really say let's keep it this way.
Right. Let's hold on. Don't let those people. That's right. So the Poskim talk about that corn is Kitnios. Soy is not. Soy is not something that Poskim talk about. A lot of Poskim talk about that Kitnios is. That's
when.
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
1784.
I don't remember. I have to look it up.
1792, I think.
Poskim talk about it. I believe the Mishnah even brings it. Poskim talk about it. It's more than Poskim. Turkish Shavites.
What's corn?
Corn. That corn is considered Kitnios. But what I'm saying to you is that even though we don't want to bring new foods into the minute, but Lamais is if everyone looks around and no one eats corn on Pesach, they say, oh, that's also considered Kitnios.
You got to find where did it start. That's what I'm asking. Everything. People don't drink corn because of the pub. Where did it start? So we know where it started. And then we went and we looked into it. Now, strawberry, whatever it is, I'm just asking for a chronological.
Okay, I don't know.
Okay,
Okay. Okay, there we go. And some people say, they say, wait a second. They say, you know what? You say, you know, there's a shiloh in Pesach whether potatoes should be kitnios or shouldn't be kitnios. Pesach talk about whether potatoes shouldn't be. They say, why are they talking about it?
He said that potatoes are kitnios.
He says
they should change and say that it's has to be higher than a misa salt.
So they say, why? Why is everybody even talking about potatoes? Potatoes are also a New World food. Okay, potatoes also didn't exist at the time of the minute. So why are they talking about it? So what does that tell you? That what they're saying is that tells you that we don't care about new foods. Okay, so this is a question whether we should or should not, whether new food should or should not be us. Okay,
Stipend also.
A staple?
Staple.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Potatoes.
Stipend helps you.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
I only have one
That's it. Okay. So that's the most obvious or simple reason that most people would know why some of these foods are not included. Okay. But now I think that there's a deeper reason. It doesn't apply to all the foods. Okay. It only applies to some of them, particularly cottonseed oil. A different question as to which foods are or not kitnios, and that's like this. We know what's the reason why people chose to make this minhag of kitnios. There's two basic reasons. One is because there might be grains mixed into it. And if there's grain mixed into it, then when I put it into water, it's going to become chametz. Okay, so I don't want to eat, let's say, corn, because if I put the corn, if it has grain mixed into it, and I put it into the pot, it's going to get water and become chametz. That's one reason. The second reason is these foods are made into flours, and they're used in ways that are very similar to the way you use wheat. It comes out making similarly. You can make a corn muffin, and just like you can make a wheat muffin. And therefore, if I'm going to eat those foods, it gives the impression to others that what I'm eating may not be chametz, and it gives a wrong impression, and therefore maybe it's misleading, and therefore they ask. That's why the minhag came. Those two reasons. Okay, so now those are the reasons. But the way things work, particularly in Yishuin Drabanan and in Minhagim, is that's the reason for the minhag. But there's different from that is the structure of the minhag. What is usher or is not usher is not only what meets those criteria. In fact, anything that meets those two criteria is usher. There's a structure to it. Okay, and the structure is we're going to explain. There's two shittas as to what the structure of the minhag is. Okay, a lot of what I'm about to say comes from a tshuva from Rameir Arik. Okay, Rameir Arik. Okay, a lot of what I'm going to say comes from that, and that is like this. There's the minhag, in Hebrew, we call this minhag the minhag of Kitnios. Okay? And in English, people struggle to translate that word, and they say you're not allowed to eat legumes. Okay? And then there's all kinds of kashrus, because this one is a legume and it's not a legume. Okay? And of course, the word Kitnios doesn't mean legumes. That's not what it means. Okay? And so the first hezbollah as to what the structure of the minhag is that if you open up Mishnah Yisrael, you find out in Hilchos Klayim that that word Kitnios is not a random word that we shouldn't talk about. When they say that word, it refers to a very specific thing in Hilchos Klayim. We talked about this in Shmita. We talked about this, and that is like this. In Hilchos Klayim, there's two big classes of foods, okay, and one subclass, and the two big classes are Zaroi Negina and Kitnios. Okay, so the word when you hear a Rishon saying the word Kitnios, he doesn't mean Kitnios legumes. That's not what he's talking about. He means it's Kitnios because in Zroim, in Mishnayos Klayim, he learned Mishnayos Klayim. Guess what? And to him, the word Kitnios had some meaning to him. Okay, so what does that mean? What's the difference between it? So Zarei Negina roughly means a food where you eat the flesh of the vegetable, either with or without the seed. What I mean is, if you eat a cucumber, you're eating not just the seed's in the middle, plus you're eating the flesh around the seed. When you eat a pepper, a bell pepper, you're eating the flesh of the pepper, you don't eat the seeds. Like you throw the seeds out. Okay, but those are both Zarei Negina. Okay, those are foods where you eat the flesh of the fruit or the vegetable, but you don't eat the seed. You either do or don't eat the seed, but you particularly eat the outside. And Kitnios means foods where you only eat the seed. The edible part is only the seed part of it. Think about a bean. Okay, you're only eating the bean part of it. You're not eating anything that grows around it. The edible part is the same thing that you'd be planting. Okay, so those are two classes. Within climate, it has some mafkamina. And a subclass is, within the group of things that are Kitnios, there's a subclass, which is what we call tfuah. Okay, those are the chameshes mini dagan. All those would qualify as being Kitnios, but they have even more special rules because they have a second qualification that makes them be considered tfuah. Okay, so there's two main classes, Zarei Negina and Kitnios, and Kitnios has a subclass which is called tfuah. That's the chameshes mini dagan. Okay, so according to this hezbollah, the minhag of Kitnios is to say, don't just refrain from eating the tvua, the subclass of Kitnios, but even don't eat the whole class of Kitnios. Okay? In other words, tvua is a subclass of the bigger class called Kitnios. So when the minhag is, don't just refrain from eating the 5 that are in the subclass called tvua, but refrain from eating all things in the full class, which is called Kitnios. And that's why when Rishonim talk about the minhag is to not eat Kitnios, they were referring to say they expanded tvua. Tvua used to be just 5 things, and it's been expanded to mean 500 things that are included in this thing called Zera Negida. Okay, I'm sorry, they're called Kitnios. That are not Zera Negida. Okay, that's one hesber for where the way the minhag functions. It's all the foods that will be classified as Kitnios within Klayim, which is, and the logic is, it's broader than tvua. It includes even Zera Negida. That's one way. Even Kitnios. I'm sorry, I keep saying the wrong one. Okay. The second thing is, second way that I'm seeing is like there's a Mishnah and a Gemara in Nedarim that says if a person makes a neder that he won't eat dagan. Okay, so one man the Amr says that he not only can't eat the chameshes mini dagan, but he can't eat kol mini the midgan. Okay, anything else that goes through the process of digun. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, what exactly does that mean? So there's Rishonim talk about it. The most clear way of reading it is from Rambam. The Rambam says it most clearly, not in Hilchos Nedarim, in Hilchos Brachos. And the Rambam says like this. Oh my gosh, I can't read it here. The Rambam says, there are 5 main grains, and they are Chit and Sarin, Kus and Shibor, Shul, Shibon, okay? And he says, the Chameshes minu ha'elu, Kishehein Shibolim, when they're still in their stalk, with their sheathing around them, then Nikroim Tvua B'chol Mokim. We call it Tvua when it's still wrapped up in the covering that it goes with. V'achar shedoshin v'zernoson, after you thresh them, you crack the outside layer, and v'zernoson, you throw it into the wind to blow away that lighter part. Nikroim Dagan. The name Dagan refers to after you've taken off the outside, and you leave just the inside, the edible part. And then one more step is, if you grind them up and make it into other food, then it's considered bread. Okay. And partially it comes from a Gemara that says like this. The pasuk says, when it says you should give truma, it says you should give reishis degancha. Okay, the Torah says you should give reishis degancha, from which the Gemara makes a drasha. You should only give truma after the tvu has come to be in the kri, in the pile. The kri means is after you've been zoira, after you've gotten rid of the outside, you broke it and you got rid of the outside, then you pile up what's left behind, the edible part that was on the inside. Okay, so it doesn't mean anything you put in a pile. It means is after you've gone through this process, merely the midgan means things that are made into dagan. Dagan means things that you took off the outside, the not desirable part, leaving behind a pile of the things that you do want to have, and therefore that's what's called merely the midgan. Okay, and I forgot who it is, who says that's his reason why he thinks that peanuts are not kitnios, and he even speaks that. He says peanuts are not kitnios because you store them in their shell, not out of their shell. You keep them, you don't make a kri of them after you've taken the shell off. It's not like wheat, that you take off the outside and then you store it like that. That's not considered the midgan. Okay, so now, if this is the hezbollah for what the minhag is, then when the minhag is, not only shouldn't we eat the chameshes mini dagan, not only the 5 main foods that are called dagan because of the way they're processed. You take off the outside, leaving the inside that you want to eat, or even kol mili the midgan is also usher. Okay, so then the minhag of Kitnios is to take any food that goes through that same kind of a process. You remove the outside to get the inside, the part that you want to have. That the kol mili the midgan is also usher. Okay, so both hezberim are saying a similar idea. Tvua has the 5 grains have a specific characteristic. They're part of a bigger group, and the minhag is to expand the chameshes mini dagan to either the kol mili Kitnios or kol mili the midgan. 2 different ways of doing that. Okay, now, one of the foods that's a nafkamina between these, is mustard. Okay, because mustard in Hilchos Klayim is not considered to be Kitnios. But the way you make mustard is it's considered the midgan. Okay, you have to remove outer layers to leave you behind the seed, the part that you want to eat. Okay, that's what you do when you make mustard. So it's now very questionable how to read what the Ramah says. What do you say?
You're saying it's midgan, but it's not what?
It's not Kitnios. It's not mini Kitnios during the class. I don't remember why. It's not considered Kitnios. Okay, so the Ramah has a very interesting way of saying. The Ramah that says mustard is also is not in Tafsir and Gimel.
By the way, that's something that's not eaten by itself.
I know that. That's true. So the Ramah says, in Taf Nun Gimel is the one halacha the Ramah says about Kitnios. But in Taf Samach Daled, okay, and 11 Simonim later, when it's talking about Hilchas Matzah, it says, the Ramah says the minhag is we don't eat mustard on Pesach. Tahade Kemine Kitnios Shenoim Ba'Isr. He says it's like Kitnios. Okay, what's the like Kitnios? Okay, there's all different ways to understand what that means. Does he mean it's like Kitnios because it doesn't qualify as Kitnios l'inyan klayim, but it is mil de midgan? So does he mean to say is because things that are mil de midgan are also included in the Isser? Is that what he's trying to say? Is he trying to say, it's not Kitnios and it wouldn't be Asr, but it's close enough that people chose to Asr it? Is it like Taz says? He says, well, it's not Kitnios at all. It doesn't qualify as Kitnios. But it grows near wheat, so we throw it into the minhag also. Okay, it's a very question.
Taz says that for mustard?
Yeah. It grows near wheat, so we throw it into the minhag also. So, in other words, what the Ramah means when he says, mina Kitnios, instead of saying that it is Kitnios, and why is he throwing it in 11 Siman later, is a very questionable and plays into this whole shaila. Okay, so now. So far.
When you grow beans and all this, they have to go through a Duggan process? I don't know how beans, we've never gone to go see beans and chickpeas and all these things. How do they grow?
I believe they do. I don't know. I believe that they do, but I don't know. Okay, so now we get to the today part of the shaila. And that is like this. The Rambam says that two foods, he says, he meant many foods, but among his foods that he mentions are foods that are not Indian klayim, they're not Kitnios, but are rather Zaroni Gina. He says, cannabis and cotton are not mina Kitnios, they're Zaroni Gina. Okay? Drama. The Hilchas Klayim. Okay? What's cannabis? Okay, cannabis is, well, what people who don't know, when you read it in a Mishnah, you say, he says cannabis. No, it doesn't say cannabis. It's cannabis. Okay? And cannabis is the plant from which you make marijuana. Okay? And what happens is that if you grow cannabis in the regular way, it grows with something, I can't pronounce it, but in short they call it THC. Okay? Tetrahydrocannabinol, something like that. Okay? It has this thing which is not, it's debatable if it's not good for you. It used to not be good for you. Now, depending on which state you live in, it may or may not be good for you. So it's considered illegal because it has that THC grown in it.
You gotta mention cannabis.
What?
Cannabis, you gotta mention that. Cannabis is marijuana. Cannabis.
That's what I'm thinking about. Yeah. So,
but in similarity to the English word.
Well, of course it's
marijuana. Cannabis.
That's what it is.
It's marijuana.
That's what it is. But wait, so when it grows with the THC in it, it's called cannabis or cannabis. In Chazal we're talking about or cannabis, and that's what in America in some places is illegal. Okay. If you breed it to not have this THC in it, then they have a different name for it. Then it's called hemp. Hemp and cannabis is the same plant. It's the exact same plant, but one is bred to not have this undesirable, this not HTC, THC, and hemp is the part that's completely legal. I mean, you can buy it every place you can buy hemp because that's fine. You're allowed to use hemp. Okay, so we'll call it hemp rather than keep calling it marijuana or cannabis. Okay, so the hemp can be made, you can make something called hemp oil and hemp milk. Okay, those are made from the seed itself. Okay, so the Rambam in Hilchos Klayim says they are not Kitnios, they are Zaroni Gina. You're not talking about Hilchos Pesach. The Rambam ate Kitnios in Pesach. Okay? So he's talking about Hilchos Klayim. He says they're Zaroni Gina. But then, go a few hundred years later, and the Maril, and the Trum Sedition, and the Gra, and the Chayadam say that hemp oil, you're not allowed to eat on Pesach. It's considered those foods, I'll use the word Kitnios, that we're not allowed to eat on Pesach. Okay? So, why are they saying that this food is asur? So, what Rabbi Yasher says is you see from that, the fact that they would asur it, even though it doesn't qualify as minei Kitnios for Hilchos Klayim, you see that the rule for what is included in the minei is not the things that are Kitnios in Hilchos Klayim. The rule is anything that's merely the midgan. Which of the two rules is the one that counts? It's not the rules of what Kitnios, because here are these poskim who are saying that hemp oil is asur. Hemp oil is a food that's not, the Rambam says beferish, so that food is not minei Kitnios l'nei Hilchos Klayim. So obviously the rule is not whatever is minei Kitnios, but the rule is whatever is minei the midgan. And therefore that's why it's asur. So you see from the fact that hemp oil is asur that these parts are saying hemp oil is also on Pesach, that they're saying that the criteria is not Kitnios, like the simple reading, like the word is. It's called the meaning of Kitnios. No, the criteria is midgan. That's the expansion is to midgan. Well, if that's the expansion, that means even midgan. Then the other thing that the Rambam said in that same Rambam that he says is not, which is cotton. So cottonseed is also, it's not Kitnios, but it is midgan. It goes through the same kind of process. It's midgan. So from the fact that these parts can say that hemp oil is Kitnios, and even though it's not in Hilchos Chaim, it's not Kitnios, teaches us that cottonseed oil should also not be, even though it's not cotton, is not Kitnios Indian Chaim, still it's Kitnios Indian Pesach, and because it's midgan, and that's the criteria is midgan. That's what we're looking for, something to be midgan. Okay, so that's how Rabbi Yashiv explains it, and that's the basis for those who don't eat cottonseed oil. And so the way it's a little confusing. I'm going to read you the word. A lot of my explanation of what Rabbi Yashiv says comes from a tshuva from Rabbi Frati, okay, who explains it very clearly. He's pretty good at explaining things. But Rabbi Yashiv, when he made this announcement that cottonseed oil was usher, gave just like a one-liner, okay, and the one-liner is. Shemavur b'maiser rav l'hagra v'av shemen zera cannabis nesa b'pesach hu hatim b'shemen kutna shu b'chlal gzeres Kitnios. Okay, so if you're reading it, you know what he's talking about. Just like the Gra says that you can't eat hemp oil, so too you can't eat cotton oil. Like, what does it do the other? What does hemp oil do cottonseed oil? I think one is one and one is different. They don't do each other. They're not the same thing. But the Hezbollah is, what's missing in between the lines here is that we see from hemp oil that the criteria is not mini Kitnios for client. We see the criteria is the midgan. If that's the criteria, then cottonseed oil is the same thing. It meets the same criteria also. Okay, so there's a lot missing. I mean, it's like 10 words here, but there's a lot in between the lines, or Rafati did a good job at explaining. Okay, so now, before I go on, you should know that, I don't know if you saw, it was publicized this week again, Rav Miller said that you shouldn't eat quinoa. Okay? What he said.
He didn't give any reason.
He said, and you probably missed these, you probably weren't focusing on these words, but now you'll read it and you'll see he says that who are then alpidin min Kitnios it's usher because l'chol dini haTorah kamoy klayim uchadoima. Okay, when he explains why you can't eat quinoa, he says, well, quinoa would qualify as Kitnios in Hilchos Chaim. Okay, why on earth did he mention Hilchos Chaim? Because he's saying that everybody will agree that if it meets the criteria of Kitnios in Hilchos Chaim, for sure it should be also as Kitnios. Forget about things that are only for midgan. But if it meets the criteria of Kitnios for Hilchos Chaim, everyone should agree that it should be also. That's what he was saying. Yeah. And on the opposite extreme is string beans. Okay, string beans don't meet either of their criteria. Okay, they're not Kitnios Indian Chaim, and they're not midgan either. Okay, and that's why there are lots of people, there are plenty of people who eat string beans on Pesach. It's not, there's no way it can be part of the minhag. Okay, most people in America don't. Most people in America consider them to be Kitnios.
And how does corn go in the criteria?
As I said to you before, it's a minhag. So minhag is just what people do. So
green beans?
What?
Is that green beans?
Green beans, same thing. Yeah. Okay. So now,
the opposite is it only the seed inside that's the problem?
That we're not allowed to eat? In theory.
In theory, yeah.
In theory, yes. Okay. Okay. So the opposite of it. So the opposite of it is that in Rameir Rick, when he talks about this, Diane Weiss, one of his chuvas, the same thing, says that no, it's not true. That the minhag is the issur is only on the foods that are Kitnios, not the foods that are midgan. That's not true. And they would argue that the hemp oil would be mutter. Okay. And therefore, they hold the criteria is, they bring riots that the criteria is Kitnios, not midgan, and therefore, that's they're taught to be matter the cottonseed oil.
Is there another reason not the cottonseed oil?
Now.
That's me machmer on the quinoa.
Now. Okay, Rabbi Yashiv said, what'd you say?
What's that, the gun?
That the criteria for Kitnios is not what it's midgan, the criteria is what qualifies as Kitnios in Chaim.
What happens to Israel?
So they have riots opposite. They have riots the other way. I'm saying that's what it's depending on. That's what it hangs on. Is which do you think is the criteria for it? Now, I have to tell you that all of this that I told you, this whole hezbollah I'm giving to you, which is at the core of why it should be mutter of the cottonseed oil, that assumes that you're willing to answer new foods, because cottonseed oil is something that people didn't eat before. And how do I know that? Because until approximately 100 years ago, cottonseed oil was dangerous. Okay, you couldn't eat cotton seeds Okay, because cotton seeds have something called gasippol. I might be pronouncing that wrong. Gasippol. Okay, it's a toxic ingredient in cotton seeds, and you can't eat them.
Well, nobody eats cotton seeds now either.
Right, I'll come to that in 1 second. No, you couldn't make oil out of cotton seed for food. You could use like for greasing the equipment. Right. You couldn't eat it until they figured out like 100 years ago how to get this gasippol out. So the people who say that even if you would side with Rabbi Yashim and say, you know what, theoretically, it could be also consumed in midgan, but we have our other rule, which our original thing we said, which is new foods don't get included in the midgan. Those who follow that, like Ramesh said, we don't follow taking new foods into the midgan. Well, cottonseed oil is a new food also, because 100 years ago, a few hundred years ago, people made clothes out of cotton, but nobody ate cottonseed. You couldn't eat it. Okay? It was dangerous to eat it. Nobody ate it. It's not safe to eat. Okay, so now, one last thing to say. Rabbi Fati brings this up. He doesn't like this.
Rapeseed oil was not dangerous, but in America it was up.
Right. Yeah, the government decided that they were not comfortable with how much oil, but people ate it. In Europe, it was a standard oil that people use. People use it. Nobody ate cottonseed oil. You couldn't. It's dangerous.
Nobody eats cotton seeds.
I'm coming to it. I said I'm coming to it. Okay. So Rafati has a third possible reason why cottonseed should not be used. And he says like this. He says, as you know, there's a Shailin Poskim whether the oil of Kitnios is also. Okay? The Ramah says it is, and other people say maybe it shouldn't be. There's a question whether it is or shouldn't. Okay. He says, but really what's going on here is that the minhag is to not eat certain foods. Let's say rice and beans and peas. That's the minhag, to not eat those foods. And as an extension of that minhag is, you don't eat the oil from that food also. That's like an extension of the minhag is, not only don't eat the food, but don't eat the oil also. So he says, maybe the minhag, the extension only applies in cases when the food itself is included in the minhag. So don't eat corn, and don't eat corn oil also. But when you come to cottonseed, nobody eats cottonseed. You never sat down, went to the store and bought a bag of cotton seeds to eat them. Nobody eats it. What do you say?
A couple years.
Okay. So nobody eats the seed itself. So it maybe there's no minhag to ask for the oil or something when the food itself wasn't included in the minhag. If you say, I don't eat soy, so I say I won't soybean oil either. Because it's like an extension. Come on, you can't eat soy, then you can't eat soybean oil either. But why tell me I can't eat cottonseed oil? Well, the cottonseed itself, I guess I can't eat it, but no one eats that food. It's not a food. It's not considered a food item. It's only used for its oil. So Ken Tyson says that would be a third reason to say maybe it shouldn't be usher to eat cottonseed oil. He himself is not happy with that reason. He has a raya which I didn't find so convincing. But he brings up such a possibility that maybe these things shouldn't be included because they're so, if it can't extend the minhag to something if the thing itself wasn't included.